You know, sometimes it feels like you've lost everything when a relationship ends. But, honestly, what you lost wasn't really your ex. You lost someone who was never actually showing up for you. Let's be real. What you lost wasn't love. It was the illusion of it. And that stings even more, doesn't it? Because you weren't just grieving a breakup. You were grieving the potential, the hope, the what could have been if they had just tried. But here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. You didn't lose your ex. You lost someone who was never truly showing up for you in the first place. See? There's a difference between someone being present and someone being available. They might have been next to you on the couch, texting you good night, saying the right things, but emotionally, energetically, they were checked out. And the worst part? You knew it. You felt it. And you kept trying to make up the difference. It's like what Maya Angelou said. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. But we don't. We see the red flags and paint them gold because we love the idea of what this could be. We believe that if we just love them a little harder, they'll finally see us, finally choose us. But they won't. Not because you're not worthy of love, but because some people are, you know, addicted to their own avoidance, their own wounds, their own fears. They don't show up. Not because you're not lovable, but because they never learned how to love properly in the first place. And that's not your cross to carry. Let's flip the narrative today. You didn't get rejected. You got redirected. You didn't lose your person. You lost someone who kept you stuck in cycles of inconsistency, confusion, and emotional breadcrumbs. And now you're free. You're free to choose better, to choose you. Albert Einstein once said, "You cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created it, and you can't heal from someone while still holding on to the fantasy of who they never became. Healing starts when you stop waiting for them to become something they never were." This video is going to open your eyes to the truth you've been avoiding. The one that doesn't just give you closure, but gives you clarity. If you stay with me to the end, I promise you this. You'll stop blaming yourself for the way they loved you. You'll understand why they couldn't show up, and why it's not your job to fix that. So before we dive in, I want you to really feel this. You didn't lose something valuable. You released something that was never fully yours to begin with. What you lost was the version of you that tolerated it. And trust me, that's a win. If this hits home, like this video, subscribe, and drop this in the comments. I didn't lose love. I found myself. Say it loud, type it proud. Let's get into it. Stay focused. A key point 1. They were physically present, but emotionally absent. Let's talk about one of the most confusing and emotionally draining dynamics in any relationship. When someone is right there next to you, yet it constantly feels like they're a million miles away. You probably remember moments where you were sitting next to them, sharing something vulnerable, something important, and all you got in return was a distracted nod, a vague response, or complete emotional detachment. It wasn't that they didn't hear you, they just weren't available for you. Their body was in the room, but their heart never fully arrived. This isn't love. This is emotional unavailability dressed up as companionship. When someone is emotionally absent, They can do all the surface-level things that make it look like a relationship. The texting, the dinners, the cute social media posts. But when things get hard, when real connection is needed, they pull back. They ghost you emotionally. They get defensive. They shut down. And slowly it starts to chip away at your self-worth. What's really twisted is that this kind of inconsistency conditions you. You begin to lower your expectations just to keep the peace. You learn to celebrate breadcrumbs. You might even feel grateful when they show a tiny sliver of affection, just because you've been starving for real connection for so long. Psychologist and author Dr. Lindsay Gibson called this kind of partner an emotionally immature person. These are people who often lack the capacity to be truly present in a relationship, not because you're unlovable, but because they don't know how to sustain intimacy. They avoid it, they fear it, or they've never developed the emotional tools to handle it. You end up doing all the emotional heavy lifting. You bring the empathy, the communication, the effort, while they coast by, giving the bare minimum. And that makes you think, maybe I'm asking for too much. But here's the truth. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. As Bell Hooks once wrote, genuine love is rarely an emotional space where needs are instantly gratified. To know love, we have to invest time and commitment. Your ex may have claimed to love you, but they didn't invest. They didn't show up emotionally. They gave just enough to keep you confused, but never enough to make you feel secure. So when the relationship ended, it might have looked like you lost something solid. But what you really lost was a connection built on emotional absence. And that's not something to mourn. That's something to learn from. Because love without presence isn't love at all. It's an echo, a shadow, and you deserve the real thing. Key point 2. You were always the one holding it together. Let's be honest. If you're watching this, it's probably because you were the glue. You were the one holding the relationship together with your effort, your patience, and your emotional strength. While they drifted, disappeared, or pulled away, you showed up, over and over again. You were the one initiating the conversations, trying to resolve the fights, doing the emotional labor. You carried not just your own weight, but theirs too. You were the peacekeeper, the fixer, the emotional anchor. And in doing so, you probably told yourself, if I just love them a little harder, they'll meet me halfway. But here's the truth. You were already going the whole distance. As Dr. Nicole LePera, also known as the holistic psychologist, said, we repeat the love we think we deserve. And sometimes we think that being the one who loves more is noble, that if we just keep showing them how safe, loyal, and loving we are, they'll finally get it. But that mindset slowly burns you out and leaves you running on empty. You were doing the emotional lifting while they took you and your energy for granted. They didn't see the late nights you spent overthinking, the self-blame you wrestled with, the effort you put into every text, every call, every attempt to keep the relationship alive. They didn't see it, because they didn't have to. You were always compensating for their lack of effort. The imbalance becomes normal over time. You end up thinking, maybe I just love harder, or maybe they're just not good at expressing it. But what if the truth is simpler and harder to face? What if they just weren't trying? That's the bitter pill. Someone who wants to stay will. Someone who values you will match your energy, not drain it. They won't sit back while you fight for connection. They'll be right there in the ring with you, side by side, not watching from the sidelines. So no, you didn't lose a teammate. You lost someone who let you do all the work, and called it love. But love isn't measured by how much you endure. It's measured by how equally both people show up. And now, you get to put that energy back into yourself. You get to stop proving your worth to someone who refused to step up. And that's not just healing, that's power. Key point 3, their inconsistency. Wasn't confusing. It was clarity in disguise. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating parts of being with someone who doesn't show up, the inconsistency. One day they're warm, present, maybe even affectionate. The next, they're distant, distracted, cold. You start to feel like you're walking on emotional eggshells, unsure of which version of them you're going to get. And because you care, you try to fill in the blanks. You rationalize. They're just stressed. They have a lot going on. They're not good at expressing themselves. But here's the truth most people miss. Inconsistency isn't mystery, it's information. And it's telling you exactly what you need to know. As Oprah Winfrey once said, doubt means don't. When you don't know what to do, get still. The answer will come. The answer is in their actions. If they were all in, you'd feel it. If they valued you, you'd know. Real love doesn't leave you guessing. Their hot and cold behavior wasn't some deep emotional complexity. It was a lack of emotional maturity, a lack of intention. It was the clearest sign that they were never grounded enough to build something real with you. And deep down, you probably felt that. You probably questioned yourself more than you questioned them. And that's where the damage really happens. Because emotional inconsistency makes you chase the highs and blame yourself for the lows. It creates a cycle of confusion that looks a lot like love, but it's not. It's just emotional instability being passed off as passion. But now, you're starting to see the pattern. The truth is, someone who's really in it with you, they're steady, they're consistent. They don't disappear when it's inconvenient. They don't treat your heart like it's optional. So don't mourn their inconsistency. Recognize it for the gift it was. It showed you who they really were before you got in any deeper. It gave you clarity, not confusion. And that clarity, that's the key to finally letting go. A key point 4. You were in love with their potential, not their reality. One of the hardest pills to swallow after a breakup is realizing this. You weren't in love with who they were. You were in love with who you hoped they could be, and there's no shame in that. It means you're someone who sees potential, someone who believes in growth, in healing, in becoming. But the danger comes when you ignore reality for too long, hoping that love alone will transform someone who isn't ready to be who you need. They didn't consistently show up. They didn't meet you halfway. And yet your mind replayed those few good moments, the charm, the connection, the chemistry, and convinced you that maybe, just maybe with more time or patience, they'd rise to the occasion. You gave them credit for intentions they never acted on. As the great James Baldwin once said, love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without, and know we cannot live within. But people stuck in their own wounds, their own fears, don't take off the mask. They wear it tighter. You weren't falling for their true self. You were falling for the glimpses you got when their guard slipped for just a second. And, let's be real, that glimpse was powerful. It gave you hope. But it was just that. A glimpse. Not a foundation, not a pattern, not a consistent effort. And no matter how much you believed in who they could become, the version you were actually with was leaving you emotionally unfulfilled. Here's the thing. Potential is not a promise. It's a possibility. And unless someone chooses to step into that growth on their own, it stays a fantasy. You cannot date a version of someone that only exists in your imagination. Because while you're falling in love with the future, you're suffering in the present. You didn't lose a great partner, you lost the idea of one. That's the difference. And recognizing that will set you free. Because now you can stop mourning what never fully existed and start building a reality where you're actually loved, fully in the present, not just in your dreams. Key point 5. You were meeting them where they were. But they never tried to meet you back. Let's talk about the emotional effort you put in, the compromises you made, the patience you gave, the times you lowered your needs just to keep the peace. You showed up, not perfectly, but fully. And the reason this breakup hurts so deeply isn't just because they left. It's because deep down you know you were always the one bridging the gap. You adjusted yourself to make the relationship work. You held space for their fears, their moods, their inconsistencies. You tried to understand their past, their trauma, their reasons for pulling away. And while that kind of empathy is beautiful, it becomes exhausting when it's never returned. Dr. Ramani, a well-known psychologist, puts it like this: empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. And that's what started to happen to you. You kept stretching, making room, being flexible. And, eventually, you lost sight of what you needed. Your needs, your voice, your emotional safety took a back seat, so the relationship wouldn't fall apart. But here's the truth. Healthy love isn't one person doing all the adjusting while the other stays the same. Love isn't about sacrificing your emotional well-being for the sake of understanding someone else. It's about meeting in the middle. And if you're the only one doing the meeting, you're not in a partnership. You're in a performance. They never tried to meet you halfway. They never took the time to ask what you needed. They expected you to understand them, but they never did the work to understand you. That's not love. That's one-sided emotional labor. So no, you didn't lose someone who was showing up. You were pouring into a cup that had a hole in the bottom, and now you get to stop draining yourself for someone who never once paused to refill you. The love you gave was never the problem. The problem was giving it to someone who didn't know how to hold it, and didn't even try to learn. A key point 6. They benefited from your love without ever earning it. Let's really sit with this one, because it's the truth that hits the hardest. They got the benefits of your loyalty, your effort, your heart, without ever truly earning it. You gave them love that was deep, generous, forgiving. You gave them time, attention, softness. You supported them when they were low, celebrated them when they were high, and stood by them even when they made you question your own worth. But what did they give back? Inconsistent energy? Emotional distance? Apologies without action? They received your best, while giving you the bare minimum. And maybe the hardest part of it all is that they didn't even have to try that hard, because you were always showing up. You made it easy for them to get love without doing the work love actually requires. As Tony Gaskins once said, you teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you stop, and what you reinforce. And you, out of love, out of hope, out of faith, kept reinforcing the idea that they didn't need to rise to your level. They could stay stagnant, and you'd still be there. But love isn't a reward, it's a responsibility. And they never took responsibility for the space they were taking up in your life. You made sacrifices for someone who never earned the right to hold that level of influence over your emotions. They didn't nurture the love. They consumed it. They became comfortable receiving from you, knowing you'd always give. And over time, that comfort turned into entitlement. They expected your love, even when they weren't showing up for it. And that's where it all broke down. Because love without effort becomes a transaction, not a connection. You didn't lose someone who loved you well. You lost someone who was comfortable taking without giving. And while that might feel like heartbreak, it's actually your liberation. Because now you get to save that love for someone who's ready to earn it and return it. Key point 7. Their absence gave you the space to finally see the truth. Sometimes it's not their leaving that breaks you, it's the silence that follows. That moment when everything goes quiet. No texts, no calls, no explanations. Just you and your thoughts. And as painful as that silence is, something powerful happens inside of it. Clarity. You start to see things differently. You begin replaying old moments, not through the lens of missing them, but through the lens of finally seeing them for who they really were. The things you once excused, the patterns you used to ignore, the parts of you that were shrinking just to keep the connection alive. It all starts to become clear. As Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. And this wound, it's not just heartbreak, it's your awakening. Their absence is no longer something to mourn. It becomes the space where you finally come back home to yourself. You stop chasing answers and start giving yourself the peace they never could. You begin to realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking someone emotionally unavailable to meet needs they were never equipped or willing to meet. And now that they're gone, you're no longer tangled in confusion. You can finally look at everything with open eyes and an open heart and say, wow, they really didn't show up for me. And here's the twist. You thought you needed them to feel whole again. But now you're seeing that the healing didn't begin with their return. It began with their absence. Because only in that quiet did you remember your voice, your power, your worth. So no, you didn't lose someone who was meant for you. You created space for the version of you that was buried beneath the chaos. And that version, she doesn't chase anymore. She chooses. She rises. She remembers. So now you see it clearly. You didn't lose someone who showed up for you. You lost someone who only ever offered you half versions of love. Someone who made you work for their attention, beg for consistency, and question your own worth in the process. But what you gained, that's far greater. You gained clarity. You gained freedom. You gained yourself back. As poet Nayyirah Waheed once wrote, "If someone does not want me, it is not the end of the world. But if I do not want me, the world is nothing but endings." And that's the shift. You no longer wait to be chosen. You choose yourself. Not out of bitterness, but out of strength. Now you know. Their absence wasn't your loss. It was your liberation. If this video helped you reclaim even one piece of your power, do me a favor. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And drop this in the comments below so I know you're walking forward with your head high. I didn't lose love. I lost the illusion. Say it. Type it. Own it. because what's ahead of you is far greater than what you left behind. And the next chapter? It's yours to write. I'll see you in the next one.